So you
No one
see, this
expected him to
equals
come
B.
home that day.
Way!
Mr.
Yes,
Daniel
watch
Anderson
this step.
was one of the richest
Incredible.
businessmen in
Awesome.
the city. His life was planned to the minute. Flights, meetings, deals, everything followed a strict schedule. We left for his business trip. Everyone knew he would be gone for 2 weeks. But on this quiet afternoon, his black car stopped in front of the huge iron gates of the mansion. The guards froze. "Sir," one of them asked in shock. Daniel stepped out of the car. His face was tired, but his eyes were sharp. "I came back early," he said calmly. "Open the gate." Inside the mansion, everything looked normal. Too normal. The house was silent. Daniel frowned. He did not like silence. Silence usually meant something was wrong. He walked in slowly, removing his coat. No one greeted him. No staff rushed forward. No sound of footsteps. No voice calling his name. "Strange," he whispered. Daniel was not a bad father, but he was a busy one. His son, Ethan, was 10 years old. Smart, quiet, and often alone. Daniel loved him, but work always came first. He believed money could give his son everything. As Daniel walked through the long hallway, he heard something. A voice. Soft, calm, caring. It was not a man's voice. It was a woman's voice. Daniel stopped. The voice was coming from the study room. He moved closer, careful and silent. Then he heard his son's voice. Ethan was speaking with confidence, something Daniel rarely heard. "No," Ethan said. "That is not right. I can do better." Daniel's heart skipped. Who was Ethan talking to? Daniel slowly pushed the door open. And then he saw it. Ethan was sitting at the big wooden desk. In front of him were books, papers, and a notebook. He was holding a pencil, focused and serious. Standing beside him was Grace, the black maid. She wore a simple uniform. No jewelry, no muck-up. Her hair was neatly tied back. She was pointing at the notebook, speaking gently. "Read it again," Grace said. "This time, believe in yourself." Ethan nodded and tried again. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Grace? Teaching his son? His first feeling was anger. His second was shock. Grace was hired to clean, to cook, to stay invisible, not to teach, not to guide, not to sit where Daniel himself rarely sat. Daniel watched from the door, unseen. Grace smiled as Ethan finished reading. "Good," she said. "See? You are smart. You just need confidence." Ethan smiled back. A real smile. A happy one. Daniel felt something strange. Guilt. When was the last time he sat with his son like this? Grace continued. "People may say bad things to you. They may make you feel small. But your mind is strong. Never forget that." Ethan looked up at her. "You always listen to me," he said. "Thank you." Those words hit Daniel like a punch. Always listen? Daniel's hands tightened into fists. What was happening in his own house? Grace placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You matter," she said softly. "Never let anyone make you feel less." Daniel could not stay silent anymore. He stepped into the room. Grace turned around. Their eyes met. The room froze. Grace's face went pale. Ethan jumped from his chair. "Dad," Ethan said in shock. "You're home." Daniel did not answer him. His eyes were locked on Grace. "What is going on here?" Daniel asked coldly. Grace lowered her eyes. "I was just helping him study, sir," she said calmly. Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Helping," he said. "That is not your job." Ethan stepped forward. "She helps me every day," he said quickly. "She teaches me things school doesn't." Daniel looked at his son, surprised by his courage. "Ethan, go to your room," Daniel ordered. Ethan hesitated. He looked at Grace, then at his father. "But..." "Now," Daniel said. Ethan left the room slowly. Silence filled the space again. Daniel turned back to Grace. "You crossed the line," he said. Grace lifted her head. Her voice was steady. "I never meant to disrespect you, sir." "Then why are you acting like his teacher?" Daniel asked sharply. Grace took a deep breath. "Because no one else was," she said. Those 6 words shook him. Daniel stared at her, speechless. Grace continued quietly. "He needed someone." Daniel felt his anger mix with confusion. Who was this woman? Why did his son trust her? And what else did he not know about his own home? Daniel turned away, his mind racing. This was not over. Not even close. Grace had always learned one rule in that house. Stay quiet. Do your work. Do not be seen. For years, she moved through the Anderson mansion like a shadow. She cleaned the floors before sunrise. She washed dishes after midnight. She spoke only when spoken to. Most people did not even remember her name. "She's just the maid," the staff would whisper. Grace heard everything. She always did. But she never replied. Because Grace knew something they didn't. She knew pain. She knew silence. And she knew what it felt like to be ignored. Every morning, Grace noticed Ethan. The boy always sat alone at the long breakfast table. His plate was full, but he barely touched his food. His eyes stayed down. His shoulders were heavy, like he was carrying something too big for his age. One morning, Grace saw a bruise on his arm. Not a big one, just enough to notice. "You fell?" she asked softly while pouring juice. Ethan hesitated. "Yes," he lied. Grace did not push. But her heart knew the truth. At school, Ethan was not treated kindly. Some kids laughed at him because he was quiet. Others mocked him because his father was never there. "Money can't buy love," they would say. Ethan stopped raising his hand in class. He stopped asking questions. Slowly, he started believing the bad words. Grace saw the change. One evening, she found Ethan sitting on the floor of the study room, staring at his homework. His eyes were wet. His hands were shaking. Grace paused at the door. She knew the rule. Don't interfere. But something inside her broke. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently. Ethan wiped his face quickly. "No," he said. Grace sat in a chair nearby. She didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "You don't have to talk. But I can listen." That was the first time Ethan looked at her. Really looked. "I'm not smart," he whispered. "Everyone else understands." "I don't." Grace felt a deep ache in her chest. "That's not true," she said. "You are smart. You just learn differently." Ethan looked confused. Grace smiled. "Do you want help?" He nodded slowly. That night, she helped him with one question, then another. Soon, helping Ethan became part of her day. She didn't teach like a school teacher. She taught like someone who cared. She used simple words, simple examples. She never rushed him. When he made mistakes, she didn't scold him. She said, "Try again." When he felt weak, she said, "You are stronger than you think." Slowly, Ethan changed. He started smiling again. He started speaking with confidence. He even started standing up for himself. But Grace stayed careful. She never told anyone. She never sat in the study when others were around. She knew her place, or at least what society said her place was. What Grace didn't know was that Mr. Anderson was watching everything now. From his office, Daniel replayed the scene again and again in his mind. Grace. Ethan. Trust. He remembered how staff spoke about her. She's too quiet. She's just a cleaner. She doesn't matter. But his son mattered, and his son trusted her. That night, Daniel watched Ethan laugh during dinner for the first time in months. "School okay?" Daniel asked. Ethan nodded. "Yes," he said. "I'm doing better." Daniel wanted to ask why, but he didn't. Later, Grace stood alone in the kitchen, washing dishes. Her hands moved fast, but her mind was heavy. She knew trouble was coming. Rich houses didn't like broken rules, especially when those rules were broken by someone like her. Still, she whispered to herself, "If helping a child is wrong, then I will accept the cost." Upstairs, Daniel stood near Ethan's room. He heard his son praying. "Thank you for Grace," Ethan said quietly. "She makes me feel brave." Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt like a stranger in his own home. And for the first time, he asked himself a painful question. Who is Grace, really? Because the maid everyone ignored had just changed his son's life. And this story was only beginning. The next morning, the Anderson mansion did not feel the same. The air was heavy. Grace felt at the moment she stepped inside. The house was clean, quiet, and perfect, yet something was wrong. Even the walls felt tense. She had barely finished arranging the living room when a sharp voice broke the silence. "Grace!" She turned slowly. Mr. Daniel Anderson stood at the end of the hallway. His suit was neat. His face was calm, but his eyes were cold. "Yes, sir," Grace replied. "Come with me," he said. No explanation, no tone of kindness, just an order. Grace followed him to the office. The room smelled of leather and power. Tall shelves filled with books Daniel had never read to his son. The large desk stood between them like a wall. Daniel did not ask her to sit. He walked behind his desk and crossed his arms. "I don't like surprises," he said. Grace kept her hands folded. Understand, sir. Then explain yourself, he said. Why were you teaching my son? Grace lifted her eyes slowly. I was helping him, she said. Daniel laughed, short and sharp. That is not your job. Grace nodded. I know. Then why did you continue? Daniel asked. There was silence. Grace took a breath. Because he was hurting. Daniel frowned. He has everything. Grace shook her head gently. He was missing something. Daniel slammed his hand on the desk. You don't get to decide that. Grace flinched, but she didn't step back. You are paid to clean, Daniel continued. Not to influence my child. At that moment, the office door opened. Ethan walked in. I asked him to help me. Ethan said, his voice shaking but strong. Daniel turned sharply. I told you to stay in your room. Ethan stepped forward. Grace didn't force me. She helped me when no one else did. Daniel stared at his son. You should talk to me, Daniel said. I tried, Ethan replied. You were always busy. Those words hit Daniel harder than any insult. Grace spoke softly. Sir, I never meant to take your place. Daniel looked at her. Then why does my son listen to you more than me? Grace did not answer right away. Because I listened to him, she said finally. Silence filled the room. Daniel looked away, struggling to control his anger. Ethan, he said, go outside. Ethan hesitated. But, now Daniel said. Ethan looked at Grace one last time and left. Daniel exhaled deeply. You crossed the line, he said again. Grace stood straight. I will accept any punishment. That surprised him. You're not scared? Daniel asked. Grace met his eyes. I'm scared every day. Daniel paused. Then he said, why do you care so much? Grace's voice softened. Because I was once a child no one listened to. Daniel felt a strange tightness in his chest. He pushed it away. This house runs on rules, he said. If I allow this, people will talk. Grace nodded. They already do. Daniel didn't expect that answer. He stared at her. Do you think you're better than everyone here? No, sir, Grace said. I think every child deserves respect. Daniel turned toward the window. For years, he had believed providing money was enough. Now, his perfect system was breaking. You will stay away from my son, he said firmly. Grace's heart sank. Yes, sir. She turned to leave. Before she reached the door, Daniel spoke again. Wait. Grace stopped. He didn't look at her. You said he was hurting. Grace swallowed. He feels invisible. Daniel closed his eyes. When Grace left the room, Daniel sat down heavily. For the first time, he felt like a failure. Not as a businessman, but as a father. Down the hallway, Ethan stood quietly listening. Tears ran down his face. He whispered to himself. She didn't do anything wrong. And Grace, back in the kitchen, pressed her hand to her chest. She knew one thing for sure. The truth had not come out yet. And when it did, it would change everything. That night, sleep did not come easily to Grace. She lay on her small bed in the staff room, staring at the ceiling. The words of Mr. Anderson kept playing in her mind. You will stay away from my son. Her chest felt heavy, but she did not cry. Grace had cried enough in her life. Early the next morning, she woke up before everyone else. She cleaned the kitchen slowly, like she always did. Every movement felt harder than usual. When she passed Ethan's room, she stopped. The door was closed. For the first time in months, she did not knock. Downstairs, Daniel sat alone at the dining table. His coffee was untouched. His phone lay face down. He had spent the whole night thinking. Ethan had called him busy. Invisible. Those words hurt more than any business loss. Daniel heard soft footsteps. Grace stood near the door. Sir, she said quietly, I will keep my distance. Daniel looked up. Something in her voice was different. Tired. Honest. Final. Grace, he said, wait. She froze. Sit, Daniel said, pointing to the chair across from him. Grace hesitated. I'm not supposed to. Just sit, he said. She obeyed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel asked, You said you were once a child no one listened to. Grace lowered her eyes. Yes. Daniel leaned forward. Tell me. Grace's hands trembled slightly. I don't usually talk about this, she said. That's why I'm asking, Daniel replied. Grace took a deep breath. I grew up in a small town, she began. My parents were poor, but they believed in education. Daniel listened. I love books, Grace continued. I wanted to become a teacher. Her voice softened at the memory. I worked hard. I studied every night. I became one. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. You were a teacher? He asked. Grace nodded. For years, she said. Children trusted me. Parents respected me. Then her voice changed. But one day, everything ended. Daniel didn't interrupt. A new school board came, Grace said. They didn't like people who looked like me. Daniel felt uncomfortable. They said I wasn't a good fit, Grace continued. No reason. Just words. She swallowed. I lost my job. Daniel felt a strange mix of shock and shame. I tried other schools, Grace said. Doors closed. Interviews ended early. Silence filled the room. I had a child, she said quietly. I had to survive. Daniel understood now. So you became a maid, he said softly. Grace nodded again. Yes, she said. Not because I wanted to, because I had no choice. Daniel looked at her differently now. You never told anyone, he said. No one asked, Grace replied. Daniel felt the weight of that sentence. Grace continued. When I saw Ethan struggling, I saw myself. Daniel clenched his jaw. He felt small, Grace said. Unheard. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. I promised myself, she said, that if I ever had the chance to help a child, I would. Daniel looked down at the table. For the first time, he saw Grace not as a maid, but as a human being. I never wanted to take your place, Grace said. I just wanted him to believe in himself. Daniel took a deep breath. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Grace smiled sadly. Would you have listened? Daniel had no answer. At that moment, Ethan appeared at the stairs. He had heard everything. His eyes were wide. You're a teacher? He asked. Grace stood up quickly. Ethan, you shouldn't. Ethan ran to her and hugged her. Daniel watched, frozen. You never told me, Ethan said. You're amazing. Grace closed her eyes. Daniel felt his chest tighten again. This time it wasn't anger. It was regret. Because the painful truth was clear now. The woman he had almost punished was the one holding his son together. And the man who owned everything had missed the most important thing of all. But the story was not over yet. Because the truth Grace shared was only part of the story. A bigger secret was still waiting to be revealed. The house was quiet again. But this time, the silence felt different. Daniel Anderson sat alone in his office long after everyone had gone to sleep. The lights of the city shone through the tall windows, but he did not see them. His mind was stuck on one name. Grace. A maid. A teacher. A woman with a past he never bothered to see. Daniel opened his laptop. At first, he told himself he was only curious. But deep inside, he knew it was something more. He typed her full name. Grace Williams. The screen loaded slowly. Then his breath stopped. Article after article appeared. Local teacher wins excellence award. Grace Williams changes lives through education. Students speak out in support of beloved teacher. Daniel leaned closer. The face in the photos was younger, but it was her. Grace. Smiling. Confident. Standing in front of classroom, surrounded by children. Daniel felt his heart race. He opened another file. A video. Grace stood at a podium, holding an award. Every child deserves respect, she said in the video. Education is not about color or money. It is about care. Daniel closed the laptop slowly. The room felt smaller. How had this woman ended up cleaning his floors? The next morning, Daniel requested old staff records. He rarely checked such things before. He always trusted others to handle it. This time, he read every page. Grace's resume was simple. Too simple. No awards. No teaching history. Just cleaning experience. Daniel frowned. Someone had erased her story. That thought made his stomach turn. Later that day, Daniel called a former school administrator he knew. Do you remember Grace Williams? Daniel asked. There was a pause on the line. Yes, the man replied. Very well. Why did she leave teaching? Daniel asked. Another pause. Longer this time. She was forced out. The man said quietly. People complained. Not about her work, but about her presence. Daniel closed his eyes. He understood. That evening, Daniel watched Ethan closely. His son was reading confidently now. He asked questions. He spoke with pride. All because of Grace. Daniel finally realized something painful. Grace had done what money never could. She had given his son belief. Later that night, Daniel stood outside the staff quarters. He had never been there before. He knocked. Grace opened the door, surprised. "Sir?" she asked. "I need to talk," Daniel said. Grace stepped aside. The room was small. Simple. A single bed. Books stacked neatly in one corner. Daniel's eyes stopped on the books. Teaching books. Old, worn, loved. "You kept them," he said. Grace nodded. "They remind me who I am." Daniel swallowed. "I know about your past," he said. Grace froze. "You searched me?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Daniel said. "And I'm ashamed it took me this long." Grace looked away. "They took everything from me," she said. "But they couldn't take my love for teaching." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. "You should not be here," he said suddenly. Grace stiffened. "I understand. I will leave if you want." "No," Daniel said quickly. "That's not what I mean." Grace looked at him. "You should not be hidden," Daniel continued. "You should be seen." Grace shook her head slowly. "The world doesn't like people like me being seen." Daniel took a breath. "I can change that," he said. Grace studied his face. "Why now?" Daniel answered honestly. "Because my son showed me who you really are." There was a long silence. Then Grace said, "I didn't help Ethan for reward." "I know," Daniel replied. He stood up. "Tomorrow," he said, "I want you to teach him openly." Grace's eyes widened. "As his tutor," Daniel added. "With respect. With a title." Grace's voice trembled. "And the staff. They will learn," Daniel said firmly. Grace looked down. For years, she had learned to survive quietly. Now, someone was asking her to stand up. But the biggest shock was still coming. Because Daniel wasn't done yet. As he walked out, he turned and said one last thing. "There is more I need to fix." And in that moment, Grace knew her life was about to change. Forever. The next morning, something unusual happened at the Anderson mansion. Grace did not report to the kitchen. She did not carry cleaning tools. She did not wear her maid uniform. Instead, she stood outside the study room, holding a folder. Her hands were shaking. Inside the room, Daniel Anderson sat at the desk. Ethan stood beside him, excited and nervous at the same time. "Come in," Daniel said. Grace stepped inside slowly. Daniel stood up. "From today," he said clearly, "Grace is no longer part of the cleaning staff." The words echoed in the room. Grace's breath caught. Ethan smiled wide. "She will be my private tutor," Daniel continued, "and she will be treated with respect." For a moment, Grace could not speak. "But sir," she whispered, "people will talk." Daniel nodded. "Let them." Later that day, the news spread through the house. Whispers followed Grace wherever she walked. She got lucky. She thinks she's better now. She forgot her place. Grace heard every word. But this time, she did not lower her head. In the afternoon, Daniel called a meeting with the staff. Everyone stood in a line. Grace stood among them, calm but strong. "Grace will have full authority over Ethan's learning," Daniel said. "Any disrespect will not be tolerated." Some faces showed anger. Others showed fear. One senior staff member spoke up. "Sir, with all respect," he said, "this will affect the family image." Daniel's eyes hardened. "If my image depends on ignoring talent," he replied, "then it deserves to change." That night, Ethan studied openly with Grace in the study room. The door stayed open. People watched. Some laughed quietly. But Ethan didn't care. He was proud. For the first time, Grace felt seen. But peace did not last. The next day, a local reporter appeared at the gate. Someone had leaked the story. "Billionaire hires former Maid as son's tutor," the headline read. Daniel was called reckless. Grace was called unqualified. Grace saw the article on her phone. Her hand shook again. She went to Daniel. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said. "I can leave." Daniel shook his head. "This is the test," he said. "Not of you, but of me." He called a press conference. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. "Why promote a maid? Is this charity? Is this a publicity stunt?" Daniel stood tall. "Grace is a teacher," he said. "Her job title before does not define her worth." Reporters turned to Grace. She stood silent. Then she spoke. "I didn't ask for attention," she said. "I only helped a child who needed help." Her voice was calm, honest. The room went quiet. That night, messages poured in. Some hateful, some supportive. Old students recognized her. "Miss Williams," one message read, "you taught me to believe." Grace cried for the first time in years. Not from pain, from release. Later, Daniel sat alone, watching Ethan laugh while studying. He realized something important. True power was not control. It was courage. Grace passed the test. So did Ethan. But the biggest test was still coming. Because Daniel had one final decision to make. One that would change not just one life, but many. The press conference changed everything. For the first time in many years, Grace walked through the city without lowering her head. People recognized her now, not as a maid, but as a teacher. Still, Grace did not feel proud. She felt responsible. One evening, she stood by the window of the study room, watching Ethan write confidently. The boy who once felt invisible now spoke with clarity and courage. "Read it again," Grace said gently. Ethan smiled. "This time, I believe in myself." Grace's eyes filled with tears. Daniel watched from the door. He had lost deals worth millions before, but nothing had ever shaken him like this journey. 1 week later, Daniel asked Grace to meet him in his office. She walked in carefully. "I've been thinking," Daniel said. "One child was helped. But what about others?" Grace's heart raced. Daniel slid a folder across the desk. Inside were plans. A school. A small one. For children who were ignored. For children who felt unseen. "I want you to lead it," Daniel said. Grace's hands trembled. "I can't," she whispered. "People won't accept me." Daniel leaned forward. "They will. Because the truth always rises." Grace looked at the papers again. Her dream, once stolen, now returned. The opening day of the school arrived quietly. No luxury, no cameras, just children. Grace stood at the door, greeting them one by one. Parents watched, unsure. Then Ethan walked up to the front. "My teacher changed my life," he said loudly. "She can change yours too." Applause filled the air. Months passed. The school grew. Stories spread. Children smiled more, learned more, believed more. Grace taught with love. Daniel visited often, not as a billionaire, but as a father. One day, a parent asked Daniel, "Why did you trust her?" Daniel answered simply, "Because respect has no color." That sentence traveled far. Years later, Ethan stood on a stage. Confident, strong. He spoke about kindness, about listening, about grace. In the crowd, Grace smiled. She had never wanted revenge, only justice. Daniel finally understood the lesson he once ignored. A job does not define a person. Skin color does not limit wisdom. And respect is the greatest wealth of all. As the sun set, Grace locked the classroom and whispered softly, "Thank you." Not to Daniel, not to the world, but to the child she once was. The one no one listened to, and the story ended where it truly began. With dignity, with truth, with respect.